Good morning, everyone. I'm David Skeel, Chairman of the Oversight Board, and I'd like to welcome everyone present to this public meeting of the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico, which is being held, as usual recently, by video conference. I'd like to ask everyone who is watching to cooperate on conducting a productive meeting, including, most importantly, keeping yourself on mute during the video conference. Let me begin by doing a roll call to determine who is present and whether we have a quorum for the meeting. So I'll start with Dr. Andrew Biggs.
I'm present. Good morning.
Thank you. Judge Arthur Gonzalez.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. John Nixon.
Present.
Mr. Antonio Medina.
Presente. Buenos días.
Thank you. Gracias. And Justin Peterson and Betty Rosa, I believe, are not on now, but hopefully will be joining us at some point in the course of the meeting. And our ex officio member, Governor Pedro Pierluisi.
Present. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning to you as well, Governor. Thanks for joining us once again. So we have a quorum present. We have 5 out of the 7 members of the board present at this point, so we can now call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask Mr. Jaime L. Corey, the General Counsel for the board, to act as secretary once again for this meeting, if you are willing, Jaime.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, Jaime. Thanks to all of you in attendance at this public meeting, which, as I mentioned, is being held by video conference, and thanks to all who are watching the live stream as well via the board's website, www.oversightboard.pr.gov. I'm pleased to say that once again, the audio of the meeting is available both in English and in a simultaneous Spanish translation, and that it's also being translated in sign language. If you log on to the English version of the website, you'll get an audio that's in English. If you log on to the Spanish version of the website, you'll hear the simultaneous translation. As usual, we'll be handling questions and comments from the public through a form that we have on our website. So if you'd like to ask a question or comment, just click the webcast page, fill out the form, including your name and any questions or comments, and we will answer them towards the end of the public meeting. The public will have, from the time that the meeting starts right now, up to 15 minutes prior to the public comments period to share these questions or comments on the form that's provided. What we'll be focusing on in the meeting today is primarily the fiscal plans for the Commonwealth and for CRIM. We'll also be doing a number of other matters as well, and the time for public comments will be after we do the Commonwealth fiscal plan presentation, as I said, towards the end of the meeting as it's going to turn out. If we're not able to answer all of the questions, usually we're able to during the meeting itself, but if we run out of time, they will all be answered. We'll answer them in writing and publish them on the website. So in a minute, I'll just quickly read the items on the agenda for today, but I'll note before I do this that we're shifting the order just a little bit from the original agenda. We were going to have the Commonwealth fiscal plan towards the beginning of the meeting, but because we have 2 members missing at this point, we thought we would put it towards the end in the hope that they will be here, or it's possible they'll be here by the time we get to the Commonwealth certification. So the items on the agenda: first, we'll be approving public meeting minutes from the last public meeting and from executive sessions between the public meetings. Second is administrative matters. Third is the certification of the fiscal plan for CRIM. Fourth is a set of reprogrammings under Section 204C of PROMESA. Fifth is several municipal debt approvals under Section 207 of PROMESA. Sixth will be the Commonwealth Fiscal Plan certification. Seventh will be the public comment period. And then last, we'll take up any other matters that come before us. So item number one on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the board's last public meeting, which was held on March 26, 2021. The proposed minutes are included in the meeting materials attached as an appendix to the board packet. The second set of meetings that we'll be approving are for executive sessions that were held between public meetings. Those executive sessions were on March 31, April 5, April 9, April 13, and April 16. Are there any questions or comments on any of these minutes? Okay, not hearing any questions or comments. Do I have a board member moving to approve the public meeting minutes?
Mr. Chair. Oh, go ahead.
Somebody moved. I'm not sure who that was. Was that Justin?
Yeah, I'll second John's motion.
Oh, it was John, then seconding John, and but seconded by Justin. And I will note, as it will be evident to folks who are watching, that Justin Peterson has now joined us. Good to see you, Justin. And so we have a motion in a second. I'll do a voice vote per usual. I will first ask for all in favor to say yes. I'll then ask if there are any opposed to say no, and then I will ask if anyone abstains. So starting with in favor, all in favor, say yes.
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 Yeah.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the minutes are approved. We also have, well, I separated them out. We also need to approve the minutes for the executive sessions that I referred to. Can I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Thank you, Andrew. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Antonio. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Say no. Any abstentions? So those minutes are approved as well. The second item on our agenda is administrative matters. Do I have anybody who will make a motion on executive sessions?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the following motion. Between the adjournment to this meeting and the opening of the board's next public meeting, the board may consider in executive session any and all matters it is authorized to consider under PROMESA, including first, any certification determinations authorized by PROMESA, including determinations under Section 206 of PROMESA. Second, any submissions or authorizations authorized by PROMESA. And third, any filings authorized under Title III of PROMESA. In each case, they're set forth as part of the vote to convene such executive session. The board may also act by unanimous written consent between meetings in accordance with the bylaws, with such consent to include consent by electronic transmission.
Thank you, Andrew. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Justin. As once again, I'll take a voice vote. Will all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that motion is approved as well. We're making good progress. I think we won't go quite so fast from here on. The next item on our agenda is certification of the fiscal plan for CRIM. And I believe that will be presented to us by Herman Ojeda, Director of Revenues and Municipalities. Welcome, Herman.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Morning to you all. Today we bring to your consideration the 2021 fiscal plan for the Puerto Rico government agency in charge of collection for municipal revenues, CRIM for its acronym in Spanish. Next slide, please. The 2021 CRIM fiscal plan is a roadmap to a fairer, more efficient property tax system that will provide municipalities with more stable income. The 2021 CRIM fiscal plan outlines various measures for CRIM to collect more tax revenue by adding properties that were previously untaxed, updating appraisals to reflect improvements to properties, and making it easier for property owners to pay taxes, all without increasing tax rates. Property taxes represent the most significant revenue stream to municipalities, and these measures to increase tax collections represent a significant opportunity for CRIM and the municipalities to improve their finances. The fiscal plan was developed in collaboration with CRIM and includes a 5-year forecast of revenues, including property taxes and transfers from the central government. This fiscal plan is both an update and a continuation of the measures set forth in the 2020 CRIM fiscal plan and incorporates new measures to improve compliance and increase the efficiency of CRIM's operations. The measures identified in this fiscal plan are projected to increase property tax revenues by approximately $2 billion over the forecasted period, which should help put the municipalities in a path towards fiscal sustainability. Next slide, please. While real and personal property taxes are expected to grow in tandem with the macroeconomic assumptions in the central government fiscal plan, when combined with the phase-out of the central government transfer through fiscal year 25, baseline CRIM revenues are projected to decline if the measures in the fiscal plan are not implemented. Therefore, advances or remittances to the municipalities are also projected to decline if the fiscal plan measures are not implemented. Next slide, please. As previously stated, the Oversight Board has worked closely with CRIM to create this fiscal plan, which includes measures CRIM supports and many mayors agree are necessary. The fiscal plan has several measures to improve the tax system, all with specific timelines for implementation. The most significant of these measures include the valuation and sale of CRIM's accounts receivable portfolio. While CRIM was required to have completed the sale of this portfolio by the end of FY21, the delay in the selection of a third-party expert to support the valuation of the portfolio did not allow for such completion. This fiscal plan requires that CRIM take all necessary steps needed to finalize the selection of the third-party expert and target to sell the portfolio by the end of FY 2022. The one-time proceeds from this transaction are estimated at approximately $400 million. Another measure is correcting incorrect mailing addresses. CRIM has identified approximately 198,000 addresses in need of update, whose potential tax revenue is $60 million in FY22 and $89 million each year thereafter. Through the Planning Metric Project, CRIM has also identified 239,500 new properties that were not registered in the tax rolls, with a total estimated revenue of approximately $134 million. At an estimated collection rate of 80%, incremental annual tax collection is projected to be $107 million once all new properties are invoiced. Other measures, as shown on the slide, will also result in improved operation efficiencies at CRIM and ultimately in additional revenues for the benefit of the municipalities. All measures are expected to be at least commenced during FY22. Next slide, please. Thank you. In addition to the measures incorporated in the fiscal plan, the Oversight Board made a series of recommendations to the Government of Puerto Rico, also aimed at improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the property tax system to increase property tax collections through a letter dated issued pursuant to Section 205 of PROMESA. First, these recommendations propose a review of all property tax exonerations and exceptions with the goal of establishing a comprehensive taxable base through the reduction in the number of exonerations and exemptions allowed. A second recommendation is to establish a market valuation. The current valuation system that dates back to 1957 simply does not allow fair, equitable, and efficient results. Assessed and taxable values must align to true market values. Third, effective property tax rates must be levied uniformly. These first two recommendations just mentioned will provide the basis or foundation for such uniform application or effective tax rates. And finally, the existing classification system for properties must be replaced with a transparent system based on broader categories of properties. In sum, the comprehensive execution of these recommendations should result in a more equitable tax system to all taxpayers while increasing revenues to PRIM and the municipalities without necessarily increasing tax rates. Some of these recommendations have been incorporated in the fiscal plan. For example, PRIM must complete all required analysis that will serve as the foundation in determining next steps for the implementation of these structural changes. I'll pause here. Thank you. Any questions or comments, please?
Thank you, Herman. Any questions or comments on the proposed fiscal plan? John?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just comment that I think there are some real good recommendations here and provisions in the fiscal plan. I'd like to encourage, to take the opportunity at this point to really work on an efficient, equitable, and effective tax collection system. Right now, you've got a situation where there's a lot of money flowing to the Commonwealth and a lot of money flowing to states and throughout the country with the federal stimulus packages. And there's a real opportunity to have that influx of money help balance the budgets as we're making these changes. But if CRIM fails to act now in doing all of these things, once that money goes away, there's going to be some pretty serious financial implications. So I guess what I'm saying is that the silver lining with COVID is that there is money coming to the Commonwealth, and the municipalities, if they take this opportunity to really reform their system and make sure that they have all the right valuations, taxed properly, make sure that they have all the properties on the rolls, make sure they have the correct addresses. It's going to put them in a much stronger position here in a couple of years when this money goes away. So there's a little bit of an opportunity to take advantage of that. If you don't have all the taxes on, you don't have equitable rates, you have people shouldering an unfair portion of the burden. So I would just encourage the officials there at CRIM to really take this seriously, take the opportunity to really make the reforms that we have outlined here in this fiscal plan. We're happy to work with them as a board, but failure to do so is going to create some real problems here in a couple of years when all this federal money goes away.
Thank you, John. Important points. Antonio, and then the governor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm gonna build upon John's comment. Certainly, there's a lot of cash flowing in right now from the federal programs, related to hurricanes and earthquakes and COVID. But it's clear that this is one of the main sources of income to most of our municipalities. And on a long-term basis, we need to make sure that we provide adequate funding for our municipalities to be able to operate. Probably, if you've seen the newspapers in Puerto Rico and you follow the real estate market in Puerto Rico, the upper part of the real estate market, it's really moving right now. It's really growing. There's some new developments, but definitely prices are on the move upward. And we still have in place laws that were put in place back in 2009 when the real estate bubble exploded. So I think we really need to rethink how do we tax properties, new properties, sales. How do we tax capital gains on many of these sales that are happening right now to ensure that we properly collect the right amount of taxes and that everybody within the socioeconomic scales contributes in an appropriate manner to the CRIM collection system. So I certainly support all the structural changes and improvements that are included in this page, but I think that's just the beginning. we really, in my opinion, need to look at the legislation and have a more fair system of collections, especially as we're seeing the upper end of the market growing in a way that it hasn't happened in many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Governor?
Yes, thank you, Gerardo, for your presentation. We received this proposed certified plan for the CRIM yesterday afternoon. So we haven't finished reviewing the plan, and I may be making additional comments in the coming days. Based on Gerardo's presentation, I should say the following. The CRIM is the main vehicle for enhancing improving the financial condition of the municipalities across the board. I am all for looking for ways of improving the CRIM's efficiency in its tax collection efforts. By and large, the measures included in this certified fiscal plan are well conceived, and I have no objection to them. I should mention, for example, that I am in support of selling the CRIM's portfolio, debt portfolio, to increase its liquidity and resources. I should say that I saw that the board is insisting, for example, in eliminating the payment of Christmas bonuses to the CRIM's personnel. There, I am not in agreement. Public employees are generally underpaid, and the Christmas bonus is part of their compensation. To keep insisting on eliminating this bonus, it makes no sense to me. So I'll leave it at that. In terms of the board's recommendations, 205 recommendations, which are incorporated, I understand, in this fiscal plan, again, by and large, I'm in agreement. I should say, though, that when the board talks about eliminating exemptions, I'll draw a line in the sense that low income population should be exempted from paying property taxes. So the art is to strike the right balance, to make sure that the threshold that is being used for providing the exemptions is an adequate one. So having said this, I look forward to reviewing and my team, FOMB in particular, we look forward to reviewing this proposed certified plan in further detail, and if need be, I'll comment further down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Any other questions from within the board or comments from within the board? Natalie, are there any public comments that we should
No,
hear?
there are not, Chairman.
No public comments. Okay, so we've had our presentation. Well, it looks like Justin has a question or comment.
I just want to thank all the team on the board and the staff for all the work they put into it. It's a great document. And I just, that said, I do agree with the governor on Christmas bonuses. That's something I think is, it's an important way to show appreciation for all the hard work that employees in the government do. But thank you again to the team and for the great work on this.
Thank you, Justin. Anybody else with comments? Do I have a motion then to approve and certify the fiscal plan, revised fiscal plan for CRIM?
I'll present the motion.
Oh, sorry.
I guess, does that mean John was the motion and Antonio seconded, or?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
However you wish.
Okay, as long as the two of you are willing. I don't want to coerce unwilling motioners. So we have a motion, we have a second. As always, I'll take a voice vote. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion and certification passes then. The next item on our agenda is reprogrammings under Section 204C of PROMESA, and I believe Natalie Dresko is going to do that presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. So I would like to just walk you through a handful of the reprogramming requests. If you could go to the next page, which we bring to you for approval. I'd like to point out number 8. Number 8 is a reprogramming request, an interagency transfer to ASEM to be able to hire house staff for the neurosurgery and other residency programs offered by the UPR Medical Sciences campus. This is something that's been in the news of late, as you know, and we received this just days ago. Of this 1.3 million approved for interagency transfer, I understand that 657,000 will go directly to the neurosurgery program, and the remainder to other residency programs that are in need. Number 9, I'd like to bring to your attention, and that is an interagency transfer to the Department of Transportation and Public Works, DTOP, for 13,724,000. This is a very important sign of great progress because this is to pay for the non-federal cost share related to 63 FEMA projects from the disaster. That means these projects are moving forward, and this is the federal cost share portion of those 63 projects becoming very real and happening on the island. If we move to the next page, I'd point out number 13. This is a reapportionment at the Vocational Rehabilitation Administration for some $2.6 million to cover tuition expenses for the students that participate in the agency's scholarship program. And on this page, number 21, $42,123,000 for the Department of Health. This is releasing funds that have been collected through rebates in a program under the department's Ryan White program, which is an HIV/AIDS program that will allow those funds that have been collected to be used according to the program's objectives for costs and services under the federal regulations. On the next page, I draw your attention to number 24, which is a reapportionment within the budget of the State Elections Commission for various cost concepts. The largest portion of this, 151,000 of this amount, is to cover the services of the electoral commissioners of the Movimiento Victoria Ciudadana and the Partido and alternate commissioners from Proyecto Dignidad. So this is covering the costs of those two parties in part. The last one I bring to your attention is number 25, again at the Department of Health, an important one. This is the approval of 200,000 moving from one agency to the Department of Health to enable the hiring of another cardiovascular surgeon at the Cardiovascular Center Corporation. With that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them about any of them, but we are asking for your approval of the reprogrammings here in the amount of $85,228,000.
Thank you, Natalie. Are there any questions or comments on any of the reprogrammings? I don't see any questions or comments. So is there a motion to approve the reprogramming request?
So moved.
I'm not sure who was first. I'll say Andrew was first. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Justin. As always, I'll take a voice vote. Will all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? The motion therefore passes. We now turn to the 5th item on our agenda, and that is municipal debt approvals under Section 207 of PROMESA. We have 3 proposed approvals. under 207, what 207 says is that no territorial government shall issue debt or guarantee, exchange, modify, repurchase, redeem, or enter into similar transactions with respect to its debt without the prior approval of the Oversight Board. So that's why we're bringing these requests for debt transactions to the board. And I believe that Herman Ojeda once again will be presenting. Is that right, Herman?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, if we're going to have the slides, please. Today, we bring to your attention the 3 municipal financial transactions under the provisions of Section 207 of PROMESA, corresponding to the municipalities of Dorado, Atillo, and Lajas. First of all, the municipality of Dorado requests new financing in the amount of $769,498 for the acquisition of municipal vehicles and equipment. Such financing would be through a debt security issued by the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, to be amortized over a 7-year period. The proposed debt would be paid from Special Additional Tax, SCAI for its acronym in Spanish, which is deposited with the Municipal Debt Redemption Fund, and our analysis of the documentation provided demonstrates that the municipality of Dorado has sufficient repayment capacity with its SCAI collection to meet both existing and the proposed debt obligation. As a result, we propose that this transaction be approved. Next slide, please. Secondly, we bring to your consideration a refinancing request by the municipality of Atillo. The municipality of Atillo proposes to issue a bond in the amount of $470,000 to convert a general obligation bond advance issued in 2011 into a municipal general obligation bond advance note in favor of USDA and to pay interest due at closing. This note would be payable from special additional taxes deposited in the Municipal Debt Redemption Fund, and our analysis also demonstrates that the municipality of Atillo has sufficient repayment capacity with its SCAI collections to meet existing debt. As a result, we propose that this transaction also be approved. Next slide, please. And next, Lajas. Finally, the municipality of Lajas is requesting authorization to amend the terms of a proposed direct loan in the amount of $2,608,000 with the USDA to defer payment of principal during a 24-month period after the loan is closed. The proceeds from the loan are to be used to remediate environmental deficiencies in the landfill and restore full operation. This loan is to be amortized over a 25-year period and will be payable from proceeds of the landfill operation, which will service other municipalities. Further, the terms of the transaction require the municipality of Lajas to establish an interest reserve in the amount of $315,000, which will service interest during a 3-year remediation period. The landfill operations forecast to generate a net cash surplus over the 25-year term, inclusive of principal and interest payments from increased tipping fee rates and expansion of services to surrounding municipalities. In addition, the municipality of Lajas generates a net surplus from excess sales and use tax and excess SCAI after existing debt service, which can also backstop the proposed debt obligation. Our analysis demonstrates that the municipality of Lajas has sufficient repayment capacity, and thus we propose that this transaction also be approved by the Oversight Board. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Herman. Do we have any questions or comments from board members? Governor Pierluisi?
No, I want to thank Herman for his presentation and apologize because I didn't mean to change his name when I referred to him previously as Gerardo. But I have known Herman for quite a while and I know he's a professional. And thank you again, Herman, for this presentation.
I noticed that Herman was smiling when you said it before, and he knows you know him. Thanks for that correction, Governor. Other questions or comments from anyone on the board? I don't see any. Thank you again, Herman. Do we have a motion to approve these debt transactions?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Antonio. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Arthur. And I should note, I believe Dr. Betty Rosa is with us now, so we have all 7 board members at the meeting. I'll take a voice vote as always. Will all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? The motion passes. And that takes us to the Commonwealth Fiscal Plan, which I believe Natalie Jaresko will be presenting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This terrible health crisis that hit Puerto Rico while it was already down after a recession, a fiscal crisis, Hurricanes Irma and Maria, the earthquakes, has left deep scars. Many lost jobs and income. Children missed way too much school. The process to reform Puerto Rico fell further behind, and necessary investments weren't able to be made. But Puerto Rico can catch up, and that process has begun. The stimulus from the federal government's recovery programs and the flow of federal reconstruction funds provides Puerto Rico with significant strength to help its economy recover, but also with an opportunity to pair this federal investment with the reforms needed to create a modern, efficient government able to shed its old and outdated ways to operating, improve education, continue the transformation of its energy system, help more Puerto Ricans to find their way into the formal labor market, and make it easier to do business here while building a modern infrastructure. The 2021 fiscal plan provides a comprehensive roadmap to create the conditions for this lasting economic growth and expanded opportunity for the people of Puerto Rico. As in previous years, this 2021 fiscal plan was updated with the current economic outlook. This 2021 fiscal plan reflects much of Governor Pedro Pierluisi's submitted fiscal plan, including a new civil service reform project, $10 million for the Comprehensive Cancer Center, over $80 million in investment into road improvements, $50 million for the Central American and Caribbean Games. It includes $1 million for the governor's request to fund a debt audit. It includes almost $3 million in additional funds for the Department of Justice's specialized domestic violence, sexual crimes, and child abuse units, and over $3 million in additional funds for social workers, family service technicians, and child protective services. Last year, when I introduced the 2020 fiscal plan, we were still at what turned out to be an early phase of the pandemic. Projections at that time, made as best as possible, were adopted under great uncertainty, but with much care. Since then, Puerto Rico has achieved amazing levels of vaccination per capita as compared to any place in the world. The federal government since then has passed the CARES Act, and the Puerto Rican government, together with the Oversight Board, has rolled out its own COVID-19 emergency measures package. Today, we know that these decisive government responses have helped Puerto Rico and the entire United States a great deal. In fact, to a large extent, that's enabled the outperformance of revenues reported by Hacienda earlier this week. The 2021 fiscal plan projects federal disaster relief funding and COVID-19 related federal funding of more than $120 billion. What you see on this page is that we expect about $44 billion of that amount from COVID related funding to come from the 3 stimulus bills passed so far, with significant funds coming from President Biden's American Rescue Plan Act only beginning to arrive now over the next 2 years. In addition to those COVID-related funds, significant disaster recovery funding is flowing actively to Puerto Rico. The 2021 fiscal plan continues to project a total of more than $80 billion of such funds over the 18-year period between fiscal years 2018 and 2035, which includes funds from FEMA, from the U.S. Department of Housing, known as CDBG-DR, but also private insurance funds. Our analysis of the economic situation today, as I said, is much different than a year ago because the facts on the ground are much different. We see a strong short-term economic recovery and income growth, but we know it will not translate into long-term sustainable economic growth unless the government acts to create a better environment for that growth. We have carefully studied the effect of the stimulus and the latest economic data, and the 2021 fiscal plan is, all persisting uncertainty aside, the best possible forecast and plan under the current circumstances. Our projections show that the Puerto Rican economy will grow 1% in this current fiscal year 2021, following the 3% decline in the previous fiscal year 2020. But those GNP numbers understate the real effect of the federal stimulus bills on household income. And if we were to adjust gross national product for that increase in personal income from the federal government stimulus checks and additional unemployment benefits, the decline in fiscal year 2020 is only 1.1%, and income growth in this fiscal year is a much more robust 3.8%. That is important to keep in mind because it better reflects the real scope of the stimulus and the true opportunity it provides for Puerto Rico to tackle the reforms needed to turn this recovery into sustainable economic growth. Our government revenue projections in the 2021 fiscal plan are based on those adjusted income numbers. The recovery will continue in the coming fiscal year 2022, but at a slower pace. So the federal government's response to COVID-19 provided Puerto Rico with 2 consecutive years of strong economic recovery. But at this point, this recovery is not strong enough to be sustainable long-term without incremental federal government policy, federal government funding, or incremental structural reforms. In fiscal years 23 and 24, economic growth will contract because a lot less cash will be flowing through the economy after the end of those stimulus checks and increased unemployment checks. Let me be very clear. Government stimulus is an extremely important element of any true recovery from such a severe economic crisis. But government stimulus is not an economic development plan. And that's why we must continue to reform government, to invest in education, prioritize and focus government spending so the size of the government fits the population and the services meet the need of the people, to implement the structural reforms that will create a more solid foundation for economic growth. So how is the 2021 fiscal plan helping to create that foundation? The plan keeps focusing on structural reforms to create the conditions for improved growth while maximizing the impact of federal recovery funding. These reforms include, first, human capital and welfare reform, promoting participation in the formal labor force by creating incentives to work through earned income tax credit benefits and nutritional assistance program reform, as well as comprehensive workforce development opportunities. Bottom line, we cannot grow our economy long-term with one of the lowest labor participation rates in the world. Second, education reform, transforming the K-12 education system so that it dramatically improves student graduation rates and the skills and knowledge to be sufficiently competitive on the global stage. We cannot grow long-term if we don't prepare our future labor force for the jobs of the future. Third, ease of doing business reform, reducing the obstacles to starting and sustaining a business, improving things like permitting and registration of property. Here it's clear, we cannot grow long-term if we can't attract, keep, and grow investments on this island that create the jobs needed to stem out migration and provide opportunity to the people of Puerto Rico. Fourth, power sector reform, providing more reliable, more affordable, cleaner electricity through the transformation of Puerto Rico's energy system. We've made great progress here. Puerto Rico has a strong independent energy regulator, and Luma Energy will modernize the grid to make it more reliable and improve customer service. And the P3 Authority has already started the process to find capable private operators for the power plants. Fiscal plan does not call for privatization. The grid and the power generation assets remain in the hands of the people of Puerto Rico, but they will be managed by companies incentivized to improve the system to generate and deliver more reliable, more affordable, cleaner electricity. Because bottom line, we cannot grow long-term if residents and business cannot afford or cannot get reliable electricity. Lastly, infrastructure reform. In January, the Oversight Board suggested that the government reform Puerto Rico's fragmented transportation infrastructure. And those recommendations to reform the transportation infrastructure are now a part of the 2021 fiscal plan. Again, here, we cannot grow long-term if our roads are congested, our air dirty, and our businesses unable to get products to market efficiently. These structural reforms have been in the fiscal plan ever since its first iteration in 2017, and they remain crucial for Puerto Rico's future. Taken together, what you see here is that those reforms provide a 0.75% lift to economic growth by fiscal year 26 and 0.9%, almost a full percentage point by fiscal year 2051. What does that translate into? Well, it has a direct effect on how much the government has available and how much it can spend on the services that people need, since more economic activity means more tax revenue. In that sense, those structural reforms are also a significant investment. The reforms amount to some $31 billion in incremental government revenue by fiscal year 2051. As in previous years, the 2021 fiscal plan also includes significant investments. Hundreds of millions of dollars of investments have been made in the fiscal plans. They've been made into our response to COVID. $787 million was provided for hazard pay for frontline workers, essential supplies and equipment for public safety. There were supplies for distance learning in the public education system, and funding for COVID-19 related research and development at the UPR Medical Sciences Department. Over $900 million has been made available to bolster healthcare infrastructure and services. These are priority government services that have been focused on in fiscal plans. That included capital improvements to public hospitals, telehealth infrastructure, education loan forgiveness for rural healthcare workers, and more. A third area of investment in this fiscal plan is strengthening our technology backbone. The 2021 fiscal plan continues to provide $400 million to incentivize private sector investments in broadband build-out and to improve access to faster speed offerings in underserved areas, as well as $50 million in technical and business education funds to help Puerto Ricans acquire technical and business skills needed for this constantly changing and developing economy. We need those systems and skills both to take advantage of an increasing online world. These funds will be actively deployed starting in this fiscal year. And one of the most important new investments that is based on the governor's proposed fiscal plan, $800 million over 28 years in long-term consistent investments to improve our civil service through a comprehensive reform that will address structural problems like political patronage and poor performance, and to make sure the government has the right people in the right place. The 2021 fiscal plan allocates $11.5 million of this 800 in fiscal year 22 for a pilot project with the financial agencies to align the government employees' capabilities and organizational structures to meet the needs of a modern government able to provide efficient services to its people, recruit and retain the right talent needed to meet financial reporting requirements, improve employee development, evaluation, knowledge transfer, and redesign performance management and succession planning to promote employee motivation. The fiscal plan also recognizes that good, efficient government is as important as the reforms to promote long-term economic growth. And that's why another important element of this plan continues to be the measures the government must take to improve fiscal responsibility. For example, centralizing fiscal authority within a strong office of the Chief Financial Officer, who oversees government procurement as well as budgeting. And this builds upon the governor's executive order earlier this year. These agency efficiencies, consolidating agencies, centralizing procurement, delivering better government services for substantially lower costs, reducing fraud, waste, and abuse in the healthcare system while improving healthcare outcomes, enhancing tax compliance, not increasing taxes, mind you, but increasing fairness by ensuring everyone pays their fair share in taxes and the government receives the revenue it needs to provide services. Now, Puerto Rico still has a long road ahead to achieve the prosperity that Puerto Ricans deserve. Fiscal year 2025 is the first year when the cumulative benefits from successful human capital, ease of doing business, and energy reforms will show results lifting the economy. But as the effect of the federal funds starts to level off, Puerto Rico's fiscal challenges reemerge. We now project that without additional incremental federal funding, or substantially increased structural reforms above and beyond what is required in the fiscal plan, the government could face deficits from fiscal year 2036 onwards, as compared to the previous plan that had much less federal stimulus and projected those deficits beginning in 2032. So what more could be done? What more should be done? Well, reducing the cost of hiring workers, attracting more investment, pushing harder to make it even easier to do business in Puerto Rico, lowering statutory tax rates while eliminating tax exemptions and deductions, growing the manufacturing sector are just some of the actions the government can and should take in addition to those that you find required in this 2021 fiscal plan. All in all, the priorities have not changed. Our vision for Puerto Rico emerges from what is possible with the resources we have. Public schools that are innovative, entrepreneurs no longer held back by endless permitting processes and unnecessary licenses, reliable electricity and clean water every day, companies from all over the world investing in Puerto Rico because they can hire well-educated Puerto Ricans who speak the language of technology, engineering, science. This is the vision you find in the 2021 fiscal plan, a vision shared with the government and the people of Puerto Rico. This 2021 fiscal plan is about a moment in time, an opportunity. And that is what I would like all Puerto Ricans to take away from the government's and the Oversight Board's work to update this roadmap. We have a unique opportunity given by significant federal funds, given by the fact that we will be getting out of bankruptcy, and we can take not small steps, but big steps to get over the finish line. And that finish line is a better life for Puerto Ricans right here in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Are there questions or comments from within the board? I see the governor has questions and or comments. And then Andrew.
Well, I'll generally, oh no, not really. I'll really make my comments because I have to say at the outset that we received the final version of this proposed certified fiscal plan for the Commonwealth at midnight yesterday. During the day, I believe we got a draft document in the afternoon. So again, my team, particularly FF, they haven't had the opportunity to review this exhaustively. So I'll make some general comments, and in all likelihood, I'll be commenting further on this certified fiscal plan or proposed certified fiscal plan in the coming days. First of all, let me thank the board for including in the fiscal plan multiple proposals. Natalie just listed them, so I'm not gonna list them once again. So I appreciate that. I would have liked to see more of a collaborative process prior to the issuance of this proposed certified fiscal plan. There was some engagement between FAF and the board, but there should have been more. So I hope that for the next round, we improve along those lines in terms of really having a collaborative process as Promesa envisions. I also have to comment on the board's refusal to include any kind of estimate of a reasonable financing of Puerto Rico's Medicaid program as of October 1st forward. The congressional leadership is already committed to, at the very least, maintaining the level of financing Puerto Rico is getting from the federal government for its Medicaid program. There's nobody at in terms of congressional leaders talking about all of a sudden reducing the funding Puerto Rico receives for its Medicaid program from roughly $2.8 billion to the baseline that the law provides for, which is $400 million. Nobody in their right mind is proposing that, a $2.4 billion cut in our Medicaid program. So the problem I see here is that by failing to include in the board's fiscal plan adequate financing for our Medicaid program from provided by the federal government, it affects all of the projections and it causes the board then to require budgetary cuts across the board in our government that are not necessary, are uncalled for, and will affect the government's ability to provide the essential services that the people expect from it. And so it is not surprising to me that some of my proposals were not adopted by the board, because again, if you anticipate that we will have this Medicaid cliff, it's very hard to provide the funds required because of my proposals. And so the board in this fiscal plan again insists on cutting transfers from the central government to municipalities. And I disagree. That's not good policy. The municipalities are basically an extension of the central government of Puerto Rico. The municipalities provide essential services that complement the ones provided by the central government of Puerto Rico. And the municipalities are not adequately compensated for rendering those services. That's why this so-called subsidies, which are not, they're legitimate transfers, should be maintained at the current level. The board's insisting on cutting appropriations for the University of Puerto Rico is also uncalled for. We talk about investing, and I appreciate the areas in which the board is providing investments and authorizing investments, but the University of Puerto Rico is the jewel of the crown in Puerto Rico. And it has already, its budget has been severely cut up to now. And there's no need for continuing to go along those lines and to bank on the university receiving a lot of federal funding down the road, which maybe is the board's reasoning, is inconsistent with what the board is doing with the Medicaid program. We shouldn't, if the board is not anticipating reasonable financing of Puerto Rico's Medicaid program, then it should not be anticipating that the university is going to obtain any additional federal funding that basically leads the board to insist on cutting the university's appropriations. In the area of healthcare, I see that the board is insisting on the municipalities again, providing, subsidizing or partially financing the central government's health program, called Vital. And from its inception, this program should have been financed with state resources, not with municipal resources. It is not a municipal program. So I am again, not pleased that the board in the fiscal plan is insisting on the municipalities continuing to provide very substantial payments to the central government to finance that program. In terms of pension reform, it is included again in the fiscal plan. We saw it. I'm not going to belabor it. As I have said many times in the past, and I'll repeat now, there was the principal pension system of the government of Puerto Rico was significantly reformed in 2013 before the board came about. So the class of public pensioners or retirees was already impaired when the board started to oversee the government of Puerto Rico and started to engage with creditors to achieve the debt restructuring that we are all looking forward to having. So that's an area of disagreement that I just have to mention at this point. In terms of reforming our civil service system and actually ensuring that our civil servants are adequately compensated, I appreciate that the board is starting to address this issue. I proposed for next year and upcoming years, basically having a uniform system with adequate compensation for all public servants across the board. And what I see the board doing is starting to go along those lines, and then talking about an 800 million investment covering 28 years. I mean, we don't have time to lose here. We cannot be talking about reforming our civil service system for the upcoming 28 years. It should be done now. We should be doing within the next 2 or 3 years. So that's an area that I have to raise. That's a topic that I need to address. So in terms of, so in another area that is important for me to mention, another area that is relevant is the structural reforms that the board is incorporating in the fiscal plan. By and large, they were already incorporated in the existing fiscal plan, but I have to say for the record that I am generally in support of all those structural reforms. And you can count on me in terms of executing them. I saw in the fiscal plan that the board is providing for an equity contribution from the Commonwealth to PREPA to ensure that we can do the Luma transition, and that is a positive. I see eye to eye with the board on this, because again, that's one of the reforms we need to do. We need to transform our energy sector, and having a P3 in charge of the transmission and distribution of energy in Puerto Rico is something we should all be for. We should not continue doing the same and expect different results. So I appreciate the board doing that. And lastly, all I'll ask is that the board should make sure that it is complying with its main mission. Its main mission is to oversee the government of Puerto Rico's use of its own resources. Its main mission is to make sure that the government of Puerto Rico puts its fiscal house in order. Its main mission is to make sure that we can fairly restructure our public debt and again have adequate access to the capital markets. That's what the board should be focusing on. And I see that the board in certain areas is trying to kind of micromanage the government of Puerto Rico. And one area that catches my attention is the area of our use of federal funds. It was never the intent of Congress for the board to oversee the government of Puerto Rico's use of federal funds. It was never the intention of Congress, when Congress approved PROMESA, for the board to be dealing with that. I can understand that when federal programs require a match from the government of Puerto Rico using its own resources, that the board has every right to oversee that. But I don't agree that the board should be trying to tell the government of Puerto Rico how it should be prioritizing or even using federal funds. That oversight is something that if it belongs anywhere, it belongs in the U.S. Congress, it belongs in federal agencies, but not with the board. The board, as you know, is a territorial entity and should be focusing on, again, our use of our own funds and making sure that we balance our budgets and that we, again, regain the capital markets confidence so that we can access them on an adequate basis. So that's all I'll say for now. And as I said at the very beginning, I may comment further down the road. But to end on a positive note, Thank you for the investments, particularly the ones that I called for and that you included in the fast fiscal plan. Thank you for starting to address the issue of our public servants not being adequately compensated, and count on my support on the structural reforms.
Thank you, Governor. It's all very helpful. I have Andrew, Antonio, and John. So, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to emphasize how important it is that the governor and the legislature implement the structural reforms that are included in the fiscal plan as a bare minimum, a minimum for boosting economic growth in Puerto Rico. No matter how many deals we cut with creditors, structural reforms are the key to raising incomes for Puerto Ricans and cutting the island's high poverty rate. The stakes for Puerto Rico are high, but also very simple. If the government of Puerto Rico refuses to enact the structural reforms that are needed, Puerto Rico will always be poor. There is no federal aid or politically easy tweaks to government policy. There is a substitute for the difficult but transformative work of creating true fertile ground for economic growth. I particularly want to focus on the fiscal plan section on human capital reform, which you can find starting on page 74 of the plan. Human capital is the knowledge, skills, and experience that make individuals productive. Economists tell us that human capital is one of the key components of long-term economic growth, the kind that would finally bring Puerto Rico's incomes and living standards up to the rest of the United States. The way workers build human capital is through formal education in school and training and work experience on the job. Workers around the world who Puerto Rico must compete with are doing just that. But as the fiscal plan shows, Puerto Rico is coming to that global competition with an education system where students receive among the lowest test scores in the world, with an overregulated labor market with one of the lowest levels of labor force participation in the world. In any other place, Puerto Rico's educational results and poor labor market would be considered a crisis. But among Puerto Rico's elected officials, there is complacency, as if this were the best we could expect. Puerto Ricans are neither being well educated nor gaining experience on the job. Without those things, they can't compete in a global economy. The fiscal plan outlines a number of structural reforms to improve human capital, as well as other areas of governance and economic policy that would at last give Puerto Ricans a fighting chance in that global competition. Puerto Rico's elected officials, the governor and the legislature, should fully commit to enacting these structural reforms as a bare minimum, or they should be honest enough to tell Puerto Ricans the real long-term economic growth isn't coming, and that what Puerto Ricans have today is about all they or their children can expect to have. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew. Just making sure I'm not on mute. I have Antonio, and then John, and then Justin. Antonio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank the board staff for all the hard work. I know that there's been several weeks that most of you work around the clock to be able to get to today's meeting. And truly, I also want to thank the governor for his active participation and some very good ideas that were received by the board and were implemented in the plan. I think we are together in a period that can be easily described as the Renaissance of Puerto Rico. We're on the first year of a potential 10-year growth period, and we have not seen this in decades. However, this growth period is fueled by federal transfers, which many of them are one-time events. I believe that we must take this opportunity to reform our infrastructure, power, roads, ports, and many other infrastructure areas that need to be restored, reform our healthcare system, and most importantly, reform our educational system from K to 12 and higher ed to ensure that our human capital is prepared for the challenges of the future. We must implement the structural changes proposed in this plan. There's no way that we can compete in a global economy if we don't have the right permitting process, if we don't have the right ERP systems to get our CAFRs out, to have all the different changes that are proposed in the plan. So certainly, I believe those are of significant priority. The ease of doing business initiatives, systems and process improvements within government, human capital development to achieve high workforce utilization, and investment in our government employees to help them to develop and improve our government execution through technology and innovation. Now, in my view, we're missing one important element in the fiscal plan, which is a robust economic development long-term plan. I believe that the Fiscal Oversight Board, together with the administration and the House and the Senate, must come together to develop an economic plan that is not dependent on status, an economic plan that we can agree upon and execute to ensure that once those federal funds go away, we can continue to move the curve upwards and drive growth in our economy. Today, we do have significant support from Washington, especially after the hurricanes, the earthquakes, COVID, and so forth. And the current administration is very favorable to Puerto Rico. However, we do have some real risks. Potential changes in the GILTI legislation provide a major potential risk to our manufacturing base in Puerto Rico. Resolving the 154 law and its creditability issues, also a significant step that we must take in order to ensure that we have a robust fiscal plan on a moving forward basis. We do have some things that may come in our favor, like the SSI cases in the Supreme Court and other cases that follow. And all of these things may change significantly our fiscal plan assumptions. Mr. Governor, I understand your concern related to municipalities, and I believe that that's an area that we must work together to help our people, as there's many municipalities and many people, especially in the poorer areas of Puerto Rico, that need to be supported and need to be helped. Related to the university, as you're aware, we have started a working group within the board and the leadership of the university to help the university maneuver some of the proposed changes. And I'm sure that together we can figure out how to improve our educational outcomes at all levels, as education is truly the first step to help our people. In conclusion, we look forward to collaborate with you to find solutions to these areas that we still may have some differences. And most importantly, we have together a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to come out of bankruptcy within the next year, rebuild Puerto Rico's infrastructure, and define the basis of our long-term economic growth strategy. Together, I believe we must ensure that we get to the 4 balanced budgets as quickly as possible, and that we return back to the markets, such that together we can end PROMESA. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. I have John, Justin, and Betty. John?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just stress the importance of taking a long-term view at this point. Puerto Rico is in an unprecedented financial situation right now. We're bankrupting or restructuring billions of dollars worth of debt. The people of Puerto Rico are under pressure because of the economy that's happening there. And it's a really unique environment. One that's more difficult than I've ever experienced in my 25 years in government. But it's so important that we take a long-term view and that we take the opportunity to implement the structural reforms that are needed. If we don't implement the structural reforms, Puerto Rico will be right back to where it is in the next 5 to 10 years. There's a huge amount of federal money, like I said, on the CRIM fiscal plan. There's a huge amount of federal money coming through, and it's important that we look at that money as a one-time expenditure, as has been stated. If we build that into the ongoing base budgets, and as we expand programs and we do many things with the federal bubble that's coming through, Puerto Rico is going to be right back into financial turmoil here in the next 5 to 10 years. It's important for us as a board, and I think as an administration, to understand the whole financial aspect. We can't just look as a board at the debt restructuring without understanding all the other economic impacts and budgets and everything else within the Commonwealth. I mean, we've got to be able to maximize creditor recovery while protecting the Commonwealth and providing a strong base to move forward. I agree with Antonio. The economic revitalization, economic development is key in Puerto Rico because we need to create a promising future for all Puerto Ricans. As far as the Medicaid expenditures, nobody's saying that that's not going to come. Nobody's saying that there's not going to be increased support from the federal government. But it's not wise to build those revenues into a budget before you have them. There's one thing I know about the federal government is that they love to work with maintenance of efforts and strings and different requirements that are attached to the federal funding. And Governor, we have no idea what those are. And so if we take those in and build those into the revenue assumptions and we spend the money, we could have a major problem next year. So I think that we're not unwilling to work with those revenues and not unwilling to have those come in, but it is important to actually receive those before we spend them. Otherwise, it just creates an unstable budget. There's things, you know, I've always worked to maintain structurally balanced budgets, and that's that your ongoing revenues are in line with your ongoing expenditures. And I've seen a lot of states and a lot of local governments get into big trouble because they've gotten out of balance as far as their structural budget. They build one-time revenues into their ongoing expenditures, they grow programs, and then when the economy's not there to keep up, you're back into a budget crisis or a budget cutting situation. So I certainly understand, and as a board, we want to make sure that we're working together with the Commonwealth. We want to make sure that we're providing the support that is needed. But if the next couple of years, if these structural reforms aren't implemented, once this federal money goes away, the Commonwealth's going to have some serious financial problems. And certainly, it's my aspiration that we have the 4 structurally balanced budgets, that we return to the credit markets, and we get out, the board dissolves as quickly as possible. But I certainly don't want in 10 years or 15 years to be looking at Puerto Rico and saying, gee, had we implemented those structural reforms, they wouldn't be back to where we were, you know, when I was on the board. So, you know, it's a very challenging situation. I can certainly understand the desire to move forward, but as a board, it's important for us to take into account the whole financial picture as we move forward. Otherwise, we're not gonna serve the people of Puerto Rico well.
Thank you, John. Justin?
Thank you, Chairman Skeel. And I also want to thank Natalie and the staff at the board for the incredible amount of effort that went into the fiscal plan. I know, as somebody said, everybody's been working around the clock. I think everybody knows that I'm here on the board to do deals. That's what my focus is, do deals and end bankruptcy. That said, I agree with what Andrew and John have said on the need for structural reform. As I said yesterday internally on a call or the day before, it's usually wise to agree with Andrew. I think that structural reform is important, and there's enough that's been said about the importance of it. What I would want to add is that I appreciate the governor's commitment to pursuing structural reforms. And I think it's, you know, certainly looking at past examples, I don't think that's anything I would take for granted or any of us would take for granted. So I appreciate the governor's leadership on that and his commitment to make Puerto Rico better and to put in place policies that are going to help it grow. You know, Antonio talked about economic growth. I think that's really important. I think that's got to be a part of our fiscal plan, but structural reforms pave the way for growth. And so thank you, Governor Pierluisi, for your leadership on that. And the last thing I want to say is, I know we are voting, I guess, on this plan today, and it's a big plan, and a lot of us, you know, are just still absorbing it. I've got enormous respect for Natalie and our staff, so I plan to support it and vote for it. I also would say that it's a living document, and it should be a living, dynamic document. So some of the points the governor made on Medicaid and other items that are going to come into focus, I couldn't agree with them more. And I have said in other public forums, and I would say now that it certainly is a mistake to forecast in a way that counts money before we have it. And it's equally a mistake to not be flexible and be dynamic. So, and I think that's the way we should view this fiscal plan. So, look forward to working with the governor's team and also to that end with the legislature as they provide their input and make sure that it's responsive and reflective of realities as they come into play. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. Betty?
Thank you, Chairman. First and foremost, I want to thank the governor for obviously the many conversations we've had and always sharing your best thinking on these issues. I particularly want to thank Natalie and our amazing staff for not only just putting this report together, but particularly really always engaging us in the process. I share with my colleagues the issue of the structural reforms, and I continue to be concerned about the educational situation, obviously, as a lifetime educator. And I'm particularly concerned about the K-12 and higher ed in terms of the landscape and the stability of our students' needs to be in school. And I implore the governor to make sure that the administration continues to give voice to the importance of our students being in school in order to be successful. It is key to have a narrative that places the emphasis on education, because it is through education and building an educational system that supports the economic development is critical. So that, for me, on a personal level, the intersection is critical. And I will continue to support, Governor, your work and the work of this board to ensure that Puerto Rico continues to have the very, very best educational system available to all students. So I thank you for the opportunity to engage and to continue this good work. Thanks.
Thank you, Betty. It has been an enormous amount of work by our staff, by the governor's staff, and I think that's reflected in the document that's in front of us. Are there other questions or comments from within the board? I don't see any. I think we have at least one public comment, Natalie.
Yes, we did, Chairman. We have a question about Chapter 11, the infrastructure reform. Will any of these actions or recommendations have any impact on accessibility or eligibility for federal funds from the U.S. Department of Transportation? Actually, from our perspective, these actions and recommendations would better position Puerto Rico to compete and receive incremental federal funds from the U.S. Department of Transportation. They would ensure that these federal funds would then be deployed efficiently, expeditiously, and in full compliance with the regulations. In implementing that transportation sector reform, the government would have to ensure in advance that all entities that are currently eligible to receive federal funding maintain their eligibility, and that any entities that must now become eligible to receive federal funding do so. So this includes ensuring that the necessary financial and organizational resources are in place so that all the agencies can comply with the federal requirements to maximize the access to federal funding. That's the only question we have from the public.
Thank you, Natalie. Do I have a motion from the board? What will be, if there is such a motion, what we'll be doing is certifying the fiscal plan pursuant to a resolution that is in the board, attached to the board packet. Does anybody make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Arthur. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Antonio. As always, I'll take a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstention? Thank you. Then the motion and the resolution passed. which takes us to the public comment period. And I believe Natalie will be fielding the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first question is with regard to Law 80 on pre-retirement. Will the board approve it? From Javier Lugo. Javier, during the last public meeting and public meeting since November, we've been very clear that the government has stated it's not going to implement Law 80 until further analysis is provided, and that we should agree on when and if that implementation should occur. The government has sent a preliminary analysis to the Oversight Board. We received it April 6th. We are reviewing this information to assess specifically if the implementation would generate savings in addition to the savings required under the certified fiscal plan to achieve a cost neutrality on implementation of that law. We intend to review the findings in our analysis with the government and request any necessary information not included in the analysis before we make any determination. Angel Arturo asks two questions with regard to PRIDCO. The first question, the new director of PRIDCO, Javier Bayon, has stated the bond debt negotiations of PRIDCO are on hold and that he has no intention to privatize or to utilize third parties for the outsourcing of property management. This is contrary to the board's certified fiscal plan for PRIDCO dated June 29, 2020. What is the board's stance on his comments? The comments are indeed not consistent completely with the certified fiscal plan of 2020. But to be clear, the PRIDCO fiscal plan does not require outsourcing, and it doesn't preclude outsourcing asset management functions of PRIDCO. It really focuses on trying to figure out in a measurable way what the balance of properties are, what the balance of contracts are, what the status of everything within PRIDCO is in such a way that then an appropriate determination can be made based on that feasibility study as to whether or not any or all should be outsourced. PRIDCO itself has started this analysis. It was required by the fiscal plan. It has not been yet completed, but it is part of what we expect to happen in this next fiscal year. The second question from Angel Arturo. The Comptroller's Office just completed an audit of PRIDCO's management of rent collections and found egregious mismanagement of public funds, allowing almost $35 million to go unpaid for so long it will most likely never be recovered. What will it take before the board decides the best position for PRIDCO is to divest all ownership of property, let competitive private economics operate the properties, and eliminate the existence of PRIDCO? So the board has not taken any such decision to eliminate PRIDCO. In fact, we understand that PRIDCO plays a very important economic development role in Puerto Rico, in particular in attracting investors onto the island. That said, the previous fiscal plan, and I assume the next fiscal plan to be certified this year, the updated fiscal plan for PRIDCO, all focus on more efficient use of those properties, appropriate collection of rents, appropriate rent schedules, and transparency in the way that properties are treated and different incentives are provided through PRIDCO. But there is no intention to divest all the property, although after a feasibility study, it's expected that some of the property may be divested. Next question is from Peter Hine, and it is a question to the governor. When will the Commonwealth's audited financial statements for the years ended June 30th, 2018, June 30th, 2019, and June 30th, 2020 be issued? Why have each of those financial statements not yet been issued? What I can say before the governor responds is that Hacienda has reported to the board that they expect the issuance of these specific audits to come in June of 2021, May of 2022 for the last two. So June 2021 for the 18 fiscal plan audit, and May 2022 for the 19 and 20. Governor?
You said it right. You answered it correctly.
Thank you. Next question is from Petros Vulgaris of Goldman Sachs. In the spirit of total transparency, not just for Puerto Rico's investors, but primarily for the people of Puerto Rico, can you please provide a detailed cash flow analysis with 3 potential scenarios for the CVI consideration. Thank you and good luck. I'll take a look at doing that, and we'll follow up with some post some analysis to the website. There are, as you can well imagine, an infinite number of scenarios, but I think the scenario that we should start to look at is with the updated projections in this fiscal plan, what do the CVIs that have been proposed and are in the plan support agreements for the plan of adjustment actually appear to be providing? So we will put some analysis on that scenario in particular on the basis of this fiscal plan up on our website. I do want to point out for everyone, so that there's no misunderstanding, that the CVI is based solely on one portion of one revenue stream. It is based on the 5.5% sales and use tax at COFINA. That revenue stream represents 7-8% of total Commonwealth generated revenues. What I mean by that is the outperformance that is being shared or is proposed to be shared in the CVI, in the contingent value instrument, in the plan of adjustment is no more than the outperformance of that 7 or 8% share of government revenues. And the last question for today from Braulio Quintero. Why have your actions not resulted in economic development? Can you explain the cost effectiveness of these past 4 years of the board? So I think it's the governor who read through the mandates of the board again to all of us earlier, and that is to help achieve fiscal responsibility and to renew access to capital markets. The board's cost effectiveness in the restructuring side of this alone is clear. In one restructuring done with the COFINA bonds, the COFINA restructuring that this board enabled and completed will save Puerto Rico more than $17 billion in debt service payments. If the plan of adjustment that has been filed in the court for the Commonwealth is approved, that total savings would go to over $60 billion. The plan would allow us to exit bankruptcy. Exiting bankruptcy is one of the key elements of moving forward in economic development. If we don't exit bankruptcy, you cannot expect the private sector to invest at the same levels on an island that's still mired in bankruptcy. PROMESA didn't give us the tools to implement a specific economic development plan, but I refer you to the comments of the board member earlier today, Antonio Medina, to say that, in fact, the board has decided to establish a subcommittee to work on longer term economic development. But also I refer you to the comments of board member Andrew Biggs from today. All of it begins, all of it, any economic development plans begin with implementing the structural reforms that enable labor force participation, quality of our human capital, electricity, and other. So all of those results are resulting, we believe, in economic development going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Natalie. Are there any other matters that we need to discuss before we adjourn? I don't see any, so I will make the motion for us to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
I saw a bunch of seconds. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Say no. And any abstentions? The meeting is adjourned. For folks in the press, we'll be having a press conference immediately following this meeting, and you're welcome to join us. Thanks to everyone for a very productive and important meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.